Hi, everyone, and welcome to Resource Revolution, the resource management podcast. I'm your host, Christine Robinson. On this podcast, we will discuss the real-life experiences of people in and around the world of resource management. Today, we have Sam Cornish joining us. Sam is a partner in BDO's financial services internal audit team based in London. For nearly 20 years, Sam has been working in and providing audit services to a variety of clients in banking and asset management. Sam, it is great having you with us today. Thank you so much for joining.
Christine, it's a real pleasure. Lovely to meet you.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation. You bring a different perspective than we've had in our guests in the past, and really love to start the conversation with understanding career path. How did you end up where you are today? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So it's been probably, I don't know if you've heard of the book, The Squiggly Career, but it's probably best akin to that. I wouldn't have plotted out the steps that I've taken to get where I am, but I've ended up where I am. I started 20 years ago at PwC in external audit. After a few years there, I went to go work on a trading desk at a big American bank. Spent a few years there learning about markets and answering phones and making trades before going back to PwC. Was in external audit and then moved over into internal audit. Left PwC again, probably the only person to leave twice, and then went to work at NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland here in London, and I was the head of operations for their group internal audit department, 500 people globally, delivering internal audit to the bank. I left that role after a couple of years and joined a consultancy firm called Protiviti. I was there for about 4 years, delivering outsourced and co-sourced internal audit work to financial services firms here in London. And then about 3 years ago, I joined BDO, and that's where I am now. I'm a partner leading our internal audit team. We've got a team of about 60 doing internal audit in London. That's part of a bigger 200-person team doing financial services advisory work. But what I suppose brings me here today is that I am also the program lead for some new resource management software that we are implementing to help our national advisory team deliver better client solutions. So having rolled out that software for our audit stream last year, that was 4,000 people nationally. We're now adding 2,000 people to that. Given my COO background, previously I was appointed as the program lead for the rollout nationally. So double hatting, if you like, coming at it both from implementing new software and trying to change culture and help people adapt the way that they're currently delivering great work for clients, but also excited about the opportunities that means for my team and how we could be more effective, more efficient, deliver better solutions for our clients too.
Absolutely. That is awesome. And as you're talking through that, I've got a couple of thoughts that come to mind. One is, it's interesting. We talk a lot in the resource management space on a personal level about career path. And in our profession, there is sometimes not a really formal delineated career path. So I love hearing about your story and the journey really that you took in all of your experiences and putting that together. I'm going to go there for a moment because sometimes I have absolutely heard from a resource management leadership perspective this idea of, well, it's not the same, because it's not the same as, sometimes in audit, for example, where it's quite clear what the levels are and what the next steps are. So I love hearing your perspective on that. Do you feel that helped you shape your perspective? Tell us about your thoughts on the way that you navigated your career.
Yeah, I probably Probably safer to say that there wasn't much navigation going on. It was maybe jumping from stone to stone as they became clearer. But when I look back over the different experiences that I've accumulated, they've definitely all contributed in a positive way to where I am today and what we're trying to do as well as a team. I didn't necessarily know that at the time, but experience is a wonderful teacher, and when I do look back, I can really see what did help. Especially obviously we love to learn things that are good, but actually learning how not to do stuff is equally helpful. And I think having been in professional services and I started my career, as I said, in external audit, and that can be a lot more predictable. You know, jobs can run for many years. They're the same time frames each year, the same book of work that you're trying to deliver. You might be trying to get a bit of efficiency out of it, but things are quite repeatable versus then moving into a consulting environment where turnaround times have to be much quicker. Each project is different. Skill sets matter. Identifying the right skill sets really drives the best client solution there, and perhaps your staff are less easily interchangeable between projects. But also talking about the value that good resource management and good scheduling can bring, and actually making it client centric rather than an administrative type role. And that's probably my biggest learning over the last kind of 5 to 10 years is that as professionals, we all have different experiences. We all bring different things to the table, and actually, yes, you can get a lovely skills matrix that sets out that Bob and Jane and Susan are experts in this and beginners in this and intermediate in those skills, but actually, really, under the resource management really becomes about understanding the true strengths of those individuals and how they could fit well in a team dynamic and therefore deliver the best client outcomes. That's when I look back versus how I've changed over the last 20 years, that's probably the biggest shift that I feel in myself.
That's awesome. And it's interesting. So I wrote something down, Sam, as you were talking. Experience is a wonderful teacher. I love that. And I think if people take something away, that should be one of the nuggets from this podcast episode for sure. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really interesting hearing you reflect on that within your own personal career path, but also taking that and applying it to really what sounds like your philosophy on how you lead and manage, which is so interesting. So what I would say is for those listeners that are thinking about their own career path and it might not be as formal as you would have hoped, or perhaps that it looks in other professions, that's not a problem. And I'm exhibit A of that myself in sort of hopping around and trying different things. And I would say, don't sleep on those lateral moves. Those are, I again, in Sam's words, experience is a wonderful teacher. It's getting that different perspective and being able to apply it in a new way. So hearing you say that and tying that into what you described as, I'll call it elevating the remit of resource management. It's not scheduling, it's not admin. It's something more than that, right? And it's really understanding what makes people tick and what, quite frankly, motivates them and drives them and creates a really good experience, yes, for them, but also the end user, which at the end of the day is the client. So it's interesting then thinking about getting that right. I don't want to put words in your mouth or lead the witness, but I imagine there's not a perfect way of doing it right off the bat. Certainly in my experience, it's been a bit of an art in kind of crafting that. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you see, just in general, as you're reflecting on that journey and thinking about really implementing a process that works well and achieves those outcomes that you're hoping to achieve, are there some common challenges that you've seen in that process? What does that what has that looked like for you?
Yeah, it's a really great point, because actually, um, it can be easy to forget that at the end of the day, we are a people business.
Mm,
Professional services firms, the only thing we have to sell is the skills and time of our people, and uh, it can also be easy to get obsessed a little bit with staff utilization, actually revenue maximization. I flip it the other way around when we look at staff utilization levels, not to say, well, could they have been busier? Actually, what learning opportunities have we missed? So if we've got members of the team that are not as utilized as we would expect them to be or would like them to be, actually what that means is that they're not getting exposure to different client situations, they're not getting exposure to different types of problems, and they're not having the ability to hone their skills in solving those problems. And so for me, good resource management is about framing up getting more learning opportunities for our people, and that applies throughout the grades, from me a partner all the way down to our grads that come in straight from university. So it's about a variety of experience, seeing clients with similar problems in different situations, seeing different problems at clients, and either applying something that you've learned somewhere else to help them solve a problem, or figuring out how you can best solve that problem. And I feel like when you frame it up that way, it helps resource managers be able to do a better job with teams, because actually it can make teams then more proactive around seeking out those learning opportunities.
yeah.
Um, the other challenge that I see is bridging this gap between the the way that people articulate what skills they have, or rather the way we ask people to articulate the skills that they have, versus the problems that we're trying to solve. Because it it's all well and good to say I'm really good at Excel. I'm an expert at writing macros. I can write reports. I've got experience with this type of legislation or regulation. But not every project is the same. Not every client is the same. And so that view of skills might not be a perfect fit for the problem that we're trying to solve. And something that I've been really trying to push hard, which is as a result of having seen this not work previously, is really marrying up how we get people to articulate what their skills are and the problems that clients are going to be asking us to solve for them. And and so our skills matrix looks a little different to what you might traditionally expect a skills matrix to look like, and actually frames things up in the types of work that we do and the types of industries that we work in, the types of clients that we work with. So somebody's profile in any team will show the different types of projects that they have worked on, their skill level in delivering that type of work, whether they're a beginner or an expert, but also the types of clients that they work with as well, be they private or listed or in pharmaceuticals or manufacturing or financial services. So then when you're trying to identify the right people to solve a client problem, and that client problem is a specific type of work, you can see who's done that specific type of work before, and get them doing similar work for a new client. And it's not always going to be a perfect fit. Sometimes someone's done it in a different industry, or they've done a similar type of work, but it's a different piece of legislation or regulation now. But that's where we want our resource management team to again be stepping up and to elevate the importance of the function in really understanding who the team are. And yes, we've got this list that says that Jane worked on these types of internal audits with these types of clients, but actually what is Jane famous for? And then being able to apply that in staffing up really high quality teams to deliver great client outcomes.
Absolutely. That is so I don't want to discount your first point. I want to go back to that because that was a big one. But this last one around the skills and your, I'd say, overall philosophy on that, I felt that in my soul. I feel like that is like we have to talk about that because it's really interesting hearing you describe the, I'd say, complexity in that. It's not the idea of an inventory of skills. Look, it makes sense conceptually, but in practice, it's not that useful, right? And I think that's really interesting because I have, in my experience, and going back to the idea of seeing a lot of different things, I have been always on the resource management side, but I've done that for very dynamic consulting practices, that advisory work that you're looking out like 2 to 3 weeks in the future. It's just very volatile in a way from a staffing perspective. Very, very different to an audit practice where you truthfully might be looking a year in advance. Not to say that there aren't emergencies and something happens in the middle of February. It's got their own whole set of special emergencies as well. But on the advisory side, I've always found that the role of the resource manager and the opportunity for the resource management process to have an impact is massive as it relates to exactly what you just described in I would say in its simplest form. It's this idea of one of these things is kind of like the other, right? Like, how are we going to translate, whether it's a skill, a trait, continuity from a client perspective, whatever that set of experiences is, into the next set of experiences. And that is really fascinating because, Sam, would you agree that, so from my perspective as a resource manager, I very much felt that on the advisory, let's just say generic advisory side, each project truly was different. There wasn't a whole lot. I mean, there were certainly things about it. Maybe it's a finance transformation project. Okay, this is also a finance transformation project, but the stakeholders are different. The requirements are slightly different. There's different technology. Is that accurate?
You've hit the nail on the head, Christine. You can call two projects the same type of work, but the fact that you are working with different clients, that in and of itself introduces your first big difference. There's the size, scale, complexity of the organization that you're trying to do finance transformation for. One team might be predominantly based domestically. Another team might have a lot of their finance processing done in an offshore or low cost center. How do you communicate remotely? How do you deliver through virtual channels when you don't have an option to be face to face? And where I see really good resource managers in advisory consulting roles getting it right is not just treating it like a game of chess where you kind of move one bit into a different block and trying to keep the pieces moving in an orderly fashion. Actually really understanding when you've got a square peg and you've got a round hole, that you can't just use a bigger hammer to force the
Yes.
peg into the hole, that actually you need to go and find a round peg to put in, or a rounder peg to put into the round
Rounder
hole.
peg. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because that's so important too, is overcorrecting to the point where you're looking for this like perfect unicorn that's going to fit also doesn't happen. And I learned that, I would say, immediately upon starting in the resource management role. That just doesn't exist as much as some people would like it to. So I agree with that completely. And it's interesting thinking about that, because what I have seen from an overall, I'd say, overarching resource management perspective, forget about industry, forget about service line, there is this idea of the skills matrix, the skills inventory can be very tempting. It's like this very enticing idea where people will really get latched on to, once we have this skills inventory, that's it. Everything's going to be perfect. Right? It's like, this is going to change things. And it is absolutely an important tool. This is not to say that you shouldn't have one, but I love what you said around how you are, and I would say, spoken like a true internal auditor, you're looking at what the outcome is, right? And you're going down to the root cause of, it's not so much the skills inventory, but it's how we're asking them to, how we are collecting the information about their skills. I love that. One of the things that I'll just kind of ad lib a bit here, but I have seen a lot of, and I'm curious your opinion on this, challenges, not with the skills inventory, not the housing of the skills inventory, because quite frankly, it can be housed in a lot of different ways that could be shareable, could be accessible, but not doing it in the way that you just described, and not aligning the process in such a way that is going to be able to allow either leadership or the resource management team to readily access the information that they need becomes a problem. For example, I had a situation where, look, it's human behavior. We're dealing with smart people here. They're going to game the system if they figure out how, where we actually had a situation, also in advisory, this won't be surprising for you, that it became very clear. We said, everyone has got to put their skills in. This is a mandate. We're going to get this out. Everyone go in and do this. And the reason we were framing it this way was, this is going to be how we do staffing in the future. We got to do this. You got to get your profile updated. And what they realized is that they took our word for it. They said, look, if this is how you're going to do staffing in the future, even if I have experience in this area, but I just don't like it, I'm just not going to fill out my profile that way because you've told me that this is how you're making your decisions, right? And so I think part of it is also then going back to the first thing that you said around this is we forget sometimes that we're a people business. That was a huge miss doing it that way, right? Because that element of really matching up what, again, not just is a check the box, I have experience in XYZ, but actually this is my proficiency in it. This is what I like about it. This is the type of project I would like to do in the future, maybe with a certain client, maybe it's in banking or insurance or what have you, right? And that part, we stripped that part out of the process, and the outcome was not what we wanted, right? As a surprise to absolutely no one, right? And so that's sort of interesting hearing you say that. And now a word about our sponsors, Dayshape. Do you ever feel like your team spends more time managing spreadsheets than getting actual work done? If you're a strategic leader in a professional services firm, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Say goodbye to the chaos with Dayshape. Dayshape is an AI-powered platform that takes the stress out of resource management. Imagine scheduling, planning, and staffing all being handled in one smart system that actually understands your business. Sounds too good to be true? Believe me, I dreamt of having this type of technology when I was a resource management leader. It's like having a superpower for your firm, boosting productivity, profitability, and even employee happiness. Plus, it seamlessly integrates with your existing tools, so there's zero disruption. Do you want to see the magic in action? Check out dayshape.com and see how your resource management function can be elevated to a more strategic position. Trust me, your team and your CEO will thank you. What would be your perspective then on, so we've got resource managers that are listening genuinely because they want to be really good at their job, right? They want the leadership team to look upon them and say, wow, that person really gets it and they're making things happen. So part of what you started to describe is this, let's call it people-centric focus, and keeping that in there. There is certainly leveraging of tools, and we'll talk about that because it sounds like you certainly have some expertise in that area. Is there anything else that you would say? What impresses you to see out of either the resource management process or from a resource manager working on some of this stuff directly?
So I think the best resource managers that I've seen are the ones who understand what it is that their clients are trying to solve, and the danger can be, believing that you're in an internal facing role, you don't have clients, but actually help. We're all in the business of trying to help clients solve their problems. And so if you see something isn't working or working how you would like it to be, the really good resource managers figure out how to solve for that. And I mean, I've got a great example from actually a recent conversation that I was having, which was somebody was talking. One of our resource managers was talking about how there's this lack of traction that they're finding talking to partners and directors in the team about the number of unassigned hours across the team. But actually, what they then have started to do, and it's almost been like a switch has gone off or a coin has been flipped over, and it's a whole different world, is they took those hours and they multiplied it by the charge out rate, and they said, here's lost revenue because these people aren't booked to client work. All of a sudden, partners are very, very interested in minimizing that lost revenue number, and they get much more engaged in helping to solve the problems that a good resource manager identifies and is trying to solve themselves, but they need help with. And so coming at the problem from a different angle, thinking around what the solution could be, not just, great definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a
Yes.
different outcome. Okay, we've tried this 3 times, it hasn't worked. How do we frame it up differently to get to the outcome that we want? And and my kind of counter on that is, uh, again, not falling into the trap of data, because we can also, just run. We fall into this rhythm, or we fall into this bear trap of running report after report after report, and not actually translating that data into insights or information. And the really good resource managers are the ones who see all of this data because they're sitting in the middle of everything, and translate it into something that somebody can do something with, or highlight. Okay, this week we're okay, but maybe in 2 weeks' time there's a problem brewing with this client or this group of people that we need to jump on now to solve. And as you say, Christine, advisory businesses are very dynamic and fluid, and so it's constantly, the challenges are constantly changing as well. And so my final kind of characteristic, if you like, of what I see as good resource managers are the ones who embrace that change. They embrace that dynamism, and recognize that, yes, there's things that they have to do every week, but actually they need to build in that capacity to their own schedule every week, or the resource management team's schedule, for the 20% that's going to be unknown, that is going to need to get solved for, rather than they themselves being busy 100% of the time on kind of routine, and then getting the surprises coming in that add to the workload.
That was cool. That's kind of meta. It's like resource management for resource managers, right? Like building in their own schedule and kind of the capacity, because we hear about that all the time from our, as you say, internal clients. They will build in a buffer sometimes, right? Depending on the type of work, and especially if it's new work or there's some sort of increase in scope or something around that, right? So that happens. And so I really like the idea of that. So as you're leading a resource management team, or you're a resource manager yourself and you're doing staffing, think about that, because I think it's interesting. If you reflect back, I would challenge everyone to do almost an exercise of a retrospective the last 6 months. Where have you had these unexpected things come up? I guarantee you've had them, right? And so learn from that experience and build that into the schedule kind of going forward. But I also really like this idea of not falling into the data trap. That's a good one. And I repeat that for a reason, because part of what we see in the resource management profession is you will see individuals that say, I want to have a seat at the table. I have a perspective that I wish that I could share, but I'm not able to make that entry point. What I would say there is, yes, it's a two-way street. Absolutely. Resource management should be viewed as a strategic function. And the other element is, and Sam, I'm curious your opinion on this, is I wonder if part of it is somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's like, look, if you're just going to send reports and you're just churning out reports, you're going to be viewed as someone that just sends reports. Whereas part of it is also take that extra step, send the report if you have to send it. Look, if you send out a certain report every Tuesday at 10 a.m., go ahead and send it. But put your perspective in there. What's the headline? What's happening? What is this information telling you? And what, perhaps even more crucial, is what does that mean? What does that, it's kind of this know your audience, right? Like, who is your client in this case? It's a senior leader in a particular part of your firm. What matters to them? And if you're paying attention, you should know that. Does that sound right? Does that resonate?
Absolutely. And actually, it's something that we are becoming increasingly focused on, is that historically we had people that sat in what tried to be kind of defined roles. You'd have an operations manager, you'd have a resourcing manager, you'd have a finance manager. But actually, from a senior leadership perspective, when you take a step back, they're all interconnected, because, like I said, the only thing we have to sell are the skills and time of our people. So hiring the right people, onboarding them quickly, well, managing their deployment on client work that they find engaging, so they want to stick around, and they grow and develop as individuals. They get promoted and have the ability to coach and grow and develop others. And then ultimately, as partners, we have a revenue forecast that we're trying to hit. And but that revenue forecast is directly impacted by the number of staff that I've got on my team, the seniority of those staff, therefore what I can charge them out at. And so if I've got a certain number of bums on seats, then that there's a cap as to how much revenue I can generate from those individuals. So now when you blend your operations, resource, and finance management together, and that's not to say, oh, everybody does everything, but actually that viewpoint, that opinion, has got to be interconnected. You've got to be able to say, well, we've got 150 staff in our team books as of 1 January. We've got 15 open vacancies. If we make assumptions on when those vacancies will be filled, this is what our revenue production pipeline looks like. Where have we got gaps and therefore need to recruit more? And we might need to recruit more people, and we might also need to recruit specific skills for those people to have. And then with that book of work that we've got to deliver, have we then got the right capacity and capabilities to be able to do that? And with a consulting business, of course, there's always an element of blue sky. We, as partners, we need to go out every year and win new work that wasn't there last year, like an audit function has. So it's always going to be an imperfect science, and you're never going to get it right. But actually, if you can get your resource manager thinking like a finance manager and an ops manager, and vice versa, in that triangle where they're all thinking about each other and the knock-on impact of what they're talking about, then I think those insights and that perspective that goes with your Tuesday 10 a.m. report has that much more weight and that much more value when you can call out those kinds of that kind of interconnected thinking.
Absolutely. And it's funny, Sam, I think you're in my head. I was going to ask you, how does the resource management process play into talent optimization, retention, finance? And you just answered that. You just answered that without me having to ask the question. So I love that. I think you articulated that in a way that not only resonates, but really brings to life the opportunity, I would say, that a resource manager has. Going back to, again, that career path perspective, you could really do something strategic, right? So if you want to be strategic, start doing strategic things, right? Thinking about that. And I guess one thing that I would say is, look, I am someone who I've spent my career in resource management. I love resource management. I'm not doing this podcast, for any other reason than that, right? So what I find that's actually really even more interesting is I am not a CPA. I have never operated as a consultant, and yet I love this stuff, right? And what I if I would offer one piece of advice is, look, and Sam, not to put you on the spot, but if you've just heard what Sam just described, I would say that the typical, I would say, partner, they want to actually improve things. They want, like, if you have an idea for how to make something different or how to make something better, generally speaking, they want to hear it. They're interested in that. So don't be shy about that, and come to the table with your thoughts, right? Go out of your way to meet with finance, to meet with whoever's managing talent or HR, to meet with someone who's in recruiting, because good resource management, I always say this, is not about resource management. It's about the contribution that resource management is making to the firm at large, right? What is the strategic goals of leadership, and how can resource management help to execute on those things? Sam, would you agree?
100%. The flipping it round, you said, what does somebody wanting to be a good or great resource manager need to kind of think about and do? You're absolutely right, Christine. When the resource manager ends up, when their success criteria is that they've got all of the jobs staffed, it's the wrong success criteria. And so
Yes.
actually they need, you need to engage in the discussion that says, actually, my success criteria is that we reduce turnover. Our the number of leavers from the team drops by X%, that we obviously meet our revenue targets, or even slightly exceed them, that maybe our recruitment pipeline, the length of our recruitment pipeline shortens. Actually, when you want to kind of lift it up even further, you're getting into almost COO type territory of helping the business to run as effectively and efficiently as it can. I mean,
Yeah.
fundamentally, you've got consultants who want to be out doing what they do best, which is taking all their training and their previous client experience and helping clients solve their problems. And when we introduce lots of internal admin that those consultants need to do to try to do that, one, we lose chargeable time, so we're losing revenue. Two, more importantly, we're disincentivizing people because actually they're not doing the things. Back to your point around, well, I don't want to do this work, so I'm not going to put on my skills matrix. That's not stuff they want to be doing. But but at the end of the day, when you get to a decent sized team of 150, 200 people, it requires smooth operation. Like, somebody's got to make sure that the wheels are well oiled, and that's where a really good resource manager can step up to being a great kind of business enabler leader, is thinking about how do we keep the wheels running smoothly. And it's not just, oh, I had 10 jobs to staff and they're all staffed, so problem solved,
Yeah.
success criteria met.
Yeah, definitely. It's this idea of thinking broader, thinking broadly, not just in terms of as you say, the kind of the check the box elements, but also operationally for your organization, how can those linkages be met? And it's interesting because, again, we're going back to this career path idea, and for those that are wanting to really be strategic and show that. And I think because it is like, you want to be motivated, you want to be able to contribute in a broader way. I heard something once that was really interesting, that was, look, this was years ago, but there was a resource management leader, I won't name names, who had said, look, when she's going through and doing performance evaluations for the resource management team, if she hears from a partner, the resource manager has all the job staff, they give me everything I want as soon as I ask for it. They never push back. Her perspective on that was, they're not doing their job right. Because if they actually were doing their job correctly, they would have had to have run into a situation where that particular leader was asking them for something that just didn't make sense from a broader perspective, whether that was for, as you say, from a people standpoint, the person doesn't want to do that type of work, so now it impacts retention. It's going to cause a problem, from a firm wide view, in terms of being able to hit plan, because maybe there's some work coming in pipeline that person really needs to be aligned to. There's so many situations. So I'll leave us with that thought, as we think about what that means from a resource management perspective. And look, you do have the ability, once you've educated yourself, to really put yourself in that position to actually have these conversations, these really strategic and higher level conversations. Now, before we end, I do want to get your perspective. So right at the start, you had mentioned the technology piece, and it sounds like somehow you became the lucky winner for the implementation around technology. Tell us, do you have any opinions on, any thoughts around the role so we talked a lot about the process, but what about the technology? How does technology in general, maybe it's AI, but just tech in general, what role does tech play in the resource management process, or perhaps said differently, in improving the resource management process?
I think tech has got a really big role to play. Now, it's not all, but it's a decent chunk, probably at least a third of a role in enabling a great resource management process. The reason I say that is I've got firsthand experience of where we've been trying to use um, a, a resource management piece of software that was clunky, difficult to use, difficult to access, limited licenses. Really took a long time to get the state of play as was on the ground reflected on the system, reflected on the sort of virtual whiteboard, if you like. So actually, back to my earlier point around, well, consultants just want to be out solving client problems. When there's any kind of sand in the machinery, they will immediately stop what they're doing. Oh, it doesn't work. Can't,
Yeah.
taking too long. Not, oh, I can't make it happen. So the technology solution that you go for has got to have that in mind, that people have got to be able to access it easily, make updates, see those updates in real time, and be able to identify problems that they themselves might be able to solve without having to rely on or go to a central kind of resource manager or resource management team
Yeah.
to get the answers to it. So it's not everything in the solution, but the easier you can make it to access and use, especially for the what I call the kind of infrequent user. And we can forget in resource management, when you're not using a tool every minute of every day, coming to it once a week or twice a week might be unfamiliar. It's like driving a car. When you first start out, someone tells you to change lanes and indicate and accelerate at the same time, the car just stops. But after some lessons, a little while, who knows, you're going along at 70 miles an hour on the motorway. So when you get more familiar with it, it becomes easier. You can do things more easily, but actually you always need to bear in mind that there are people who aren't using it all day, every day, and it needs to be as easy for them to use as it is for your experienced users
What
to
a great
use.
analogy. Yeah, that intuitive component makes so much sense. And again, I would say it goes back to your earlier point around know your customer, right? Like these are
Yeah.
your clients. And so you have to meet them where they are and see what makes sense for them. I love that. I think that's really I think that's a good way to wrap, but I can't let you go until we play our little game. This is our would you rather. So the way that this is going to work, I'm going to ask Sam 3 questions. He has not seen these before. We're going to get his genuine response. We're going to give you 2 scenarios and you pick which one you'd rather be in. All right, question number 1. Would you rather manage a global team of 500 internal auditors with unlimited resources, but no flexibility and deadlines? Or a lean team with 10 people, but complete control over project timelines?
A lean team with complete control over project deadlines.
Interesting.
I think that so in life, it can either be high quality, fast, or cheap. You can only pick 2 of the 3. You can never have all 3.
I love this.
So I would rather have high quality and I'd say fast, but at least knowing where to deliver,
Yes.
than having to kind of push things through the sausage cut and sacrifice the quality side for meeting deadlines when you don't necessarily there are things outside your control
Right.
that
Yeah.
might result in a better outcome piece of work, but you'd need to change the deadlines.
We're really getting into Sam's head here. I like it. We're getting into your the way that you tick. I like this one. All right, so question 2. Would you rather reallocate resources across a multinational banking transformation program with shifting priorities, or have 2 business days to design a resource plan for a highly regulated mortgage lender?
I would like to have 2 days to design a resource plan.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've always, not always, but at the start of my career, I didn't necessarily follow this very, very well. But as I have gathered more battle scars, I have learned the value of good planning, and actually, in almost every project that I do, the phase that we call planning could be 30 to 40% of the total time that we're expecting to spend delivering. Because there's so much to be gained from making sure you really understand the real problem before designing the real solution, that if you skimp on planning time, you're snookered from the get-go, in my view.
These are some wise words right there. All right, last question. Would you rather optimize staffing for an outsourced internal audit function where every team member has a completely different specialty, or solve a critical last-minute staffing issue on the same day as an audit committee meeting?
I would rather optimize the team. Now, I'm also saying that because I don't like panic. So if something comes up that is urgent on 2 hours before a major committee meeting, I'm actually probably going to spend a lot of time making sure that I understand what needs to be done, but not actually doing the solution.
Right,
As I said, you're not going to get a high quality answer because you do it quick. And I think if there's only one thing that I've learned in 20 years in the industry, it's that stuff is always changing. And so you kind of just have to learn to live with that and acknowledge that when you draw a line in the sand, okay, that might have been 5 days ago and things have moved on by then, but your line in the sand was still valid. You still, there's still value in what you knew up until that point and what your plan going forward is. And then you just constantly need to reassess new information. So I hate urgent tasks. I use the Eisenhower matrix: urgency and importance, and everything. I try to get everything into the urgent, not into the important, not urgent quadrant, so that there's as little panic as possible in my day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month.
That is a very good philosophy and a nice way to wrap up our conversation. I'd say it's let's avoid panic. That's good. Words of wisdom. Sam, it has been awesome talking with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all of your perspectives with us. And with that, we'll wrap up our conversation. Thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to hear more episodes.